Hello! Back in high school, I came up with the brilliant idea that I was good enough at writing to the point where I should write a book. And I wrote the entire thing, a mystery novel in fact. Came out of my brain, put it into here. It's about as good as you would expect that a 15-year-old version of me would write. The book is terrible. It has this really embarrassing photo of me when I was 16 on the back of it. I somehow convinced every classmate I ever met to buy it, and a lot of them read it. And if you're one of those people, I apologize. And I made a joke 2 years ago that I would never read this book again unless I hit 1,000 subscribers, thinking that that would never happen, and somehow it did. So this is my 1,000 subscriber special. I want to thank you guys, all 1,000 plus of you. If you want to hear me say something really gay about how much I appreciate you, just wait until this timestamp. But for now, I'm going to go into how awful this book is because I reread the whole thing front to back. I would like to thank alcohol for making all of this possible. This video is not sponsored, but I would not have been able to read the book or review it if it wasn't for copious amounts of alcohol. So thank you, alcohol. Anyways, let's just jump right into it. So the book is called The Mysterious Case of the Yellow County Lake. Yes, that title is long. Yes, that title is confusing. But I couldn't come up with anything better. In fact, my mom came up with the title for this book. She was one of my biggest fans. So we have it, Chapter 1. And Chapter 1, basically introducing us to our main characters. They're a group of friends in high school. There's 6 of them. And they all have one personality trait, so this whole chapter is just introducing to you their names and their one personality trait. So we have Dominic. He's just the nicest guy, and he loves sports, and he just has such a short attention span. That's his whole character. We have Jeremy, who's the quiet nerd. That's him. Roger has no personality. There's Jen. She's dating Dominic. That's her personality. And we have Stanley, who is described as having a high-pitched voice and always wanting to be the center of attention. And when I read that the other day, I wrote in my notes, please don't let Stanley be a gay stereotype that my 15-year-old brain came up with, because I legitimately could not remember. And then there's Nicole, who is, her personality, she's sarcastic, and she is a lesbian. Those are her 2 personality traits. I think when I was writing this, I was trying to be inclusive, but I had literally never met a lesbian in my entire life. Either that, or I just was so out of touch that so much of this dialogue just comes off as Netflix original movie pandering to the LGBT community. So I'm really glad that that's the level of writing that I was at when I was 15. So we introduced to all the characters. They have terrible dialogue where they just describe what their personality traits are. And then we learn that Nicole is a vegan, and this genius, hilarious comedy is made. They make fun of her for drinking almond milk. And Roger says, how do you milk an almond? And that's the joke. They all make fun of her for drinking almond milk. Isn't it funny because almond milk is different from regular milk? So chapter 1 ends with some kind of ominous, ooh, one of the 6 characters is gonna die, but you don't know who's gonna die yet. So we go on to chapter 2. All of the friends decide to go to a 4th of July event party that's being hosted by their school, because if there's any one place that high schoolers want to go to when they could be partying, is the school property. One of the most awful writing techniques that I use all the time in this book is paragraphs of exposition that just explain what every character is thinking at all times. Everyone's motivation is listed right out for you on the page for paragraphs on end, pages on end. It's awful. Roger's trying to tell Jeremy, oh, you should totally go to this party because you're quiet. That's your only personality trait, and you should make other friends. I know that I'm your friend and you have a group of 6 very supportive friends, but you need to learn how to make other friends, weirdo. And Jeremy's like, no, I don't want to go because I'm quiet and that's my only personality trait, and if I were to go and meet other people, then I would lose my one personality trait, and we can't have that. Oh good, we get 15-year-old me writing lesbian dialogue for Nicole. She's looking at one of her classmates named Stacy and just thinking, God, I just hope that she's gay, but I have no idea. And then at one point, Nicole realizes that Stacy is actually straight, and she says, why do the good ones have to be straight? Why did I write that? That's so bad. Alright, so then we have Dominic and Jen who are playing some kind of horseshoe game, and we get the junkie bully characters that come in. And we know that they're junkies because everyone's just calling them junkies, even though all they do is smoke weed every now and then. And my phraseology in this book towards weed, it's like, you could tell I had never smoked weed before, and I believed all those crazy PSAs telling you that it was like a gateway drug and it's gonna ruin your life. So they keep calling these 3 pot smokers junkies, which is terrific. Way to go, 15-year-old me. Alright, so everyone goes home and we start chapter 3, where we know one of the characters is dead now, we just don't know which one, and that's supposed to be this intriguing thing like, ooh, I wonder who's gonna die, but we don't care about any of these characters because they all suck, so I kind of hope all of them are dead. That would make this a way shorter read, and then it would be better for my sanity, but here we are. So Roger wakes up in his bed, and he checks his phone and sees that Jeremy didn't text him, and Roger's like, why didn't Jeremy text me? Jeremy always texts me as soon as he wakes up. Is something wrong with him? And I read that, and I was like, dude, you're not his mom. He doesn't have to text you when he wakes up. That's weirdly possessive for you to do to your friend. Roger, concerned about Jeremy's well-being, decides to call Nicole, not Jeremy, to see if she knows what's up with him. And she gets mad at him for it because of course you would, because she was sleeping. And then we have more really cringy dialogue from Nicole, where we learn that she's a scene kid. I'll just read it. I don't really think that I'm gothic. I mean, I do listen to MCR and Evanescence, and I do have black hair with pink highlights, and I do like to wear black. Wait, hold on, am I goth? Because I'm actually starting to believe them. They bother. So then Nicole's like, hey Roger, why did you call me when you could have just called Jeremy? And Roger's response was, well, if he was asleep, I didn't want to wake him up. And then Nicole's like, well, you woke me up, so fuck you. And honestly, Nicole, that's a reasonable response. All I'm getting from here is that Roger is a dumbass. That's his only character trait, and it's gonna stay pretty consistent throughout the whole book. Which honestly, if that's the most consistent character item we're gonna get is Roger being a dumbass, I think that's pretty fantastic. And then we get 2 pages, 2 full pages of Roger just thinking. We're telling you all of his motivation and everything he's thinking. It's such a, oh no, I was wrong, 3 pages of this. And then as soon as Roger hangs up, he gets a phone call, and he's like, ooh, I wonder who it could be, that's tension. And then it turns out to be Jen. Like, you don't have caller ID? And then Jen tells Roger that Stanley called her the previous night when he was walking home alone and said that he was being stalked by someone, and then Stanley mysteriously hung up out of nowhere. And Jen is such a dumbass that she didn't think to call the police when this happened. The thing is, so much of the drama that happened in this book would have been avoided if someone had either called the police or called one of their family members and had any normal response to any of the situations that are happening, but no, that never happens. No one ever calls the police. So then Roger just kind of decides to walk to Jeremy's house. He doesn't call Jeremy, he just starts walking to Jeremy's house completely uninvited, not texting him or calling him to ask him if he's okay or anything, just gonna walk to his house. Alright, so chapter 4. Chapter 3 was phone calls the chapter. Let's see what kind of juicy drama chapter 4 has. So we immediately get shown a police officer that we don't give a shit about with no personality, who's just finding out information that we already knew in a flashback at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Fantastic. Chapter 5, that was all of chapter 4. So now we're on to chapter 5. So Roger's now at Jeremy's house, and Jeremy's dad opens the door, and he's on a phone call, and it seems like it's something important, but we don't find out what that is. Jeremy's dad is like, yeah, Roger, just go upstairs. My son is asleep, but just go upstairs and hang out with him. That's fine. So Roger goes upstairs and sees Jeremy is alive. So Jeremy's not the dead one. And Roger and Jeremy are talking, and Jeremy tells Roger that Stanley had called him the previous night, telling Jeremy that he was getting stalked, just like he called Jen, and then hung up abruptly on Jeremy as well, and then Jeremy also didn't decide to call the cops. These characters are so smart. I really like they're just so intelligent. Oh, and then we get this hilarious joke where Roger is telling Jeremy basically all the basic things that we know about these characters, suggesting activities Jeremy could do with all of them, and then when he gets to Nicole, he says, "Oh, you also need to talk to Nicole about almond milk." And then they talk about how they just love their friends. "Oh, my friends are so great. I sure love that my friends are just so alive and have full of potential and they're just so young, have beating hearts. That's such a great character trait to have in a friend." And then Jeremy's father comes in and is like, "Guys, your friend Dominic is dead." So Stanley wasn't dead. It was actually Dominic, which is, it would be an interesting twist if anyone cared enough to read up to this point. Alright, so chapter 6, we get introduced with 2 pages of exposition about how their friends are all sad. And then we just get a funeral scene, which was so cringy just because it's like everyone monologuing about, "Oh my god, Dominic was like my best friend and he was just so nice and everyone loved him." And then the chief of police, this is weird. The chief of police sends every one of Dominic's family. This is a brief intermission. This is Momo. Say hi to Momo. You want to be in the video? Of course you want to be in the video. Yes, my 3 guinea pigs are named Appa, Momo, and Toph. So, the chief of police sends everyone that Dominic's ever met an email that foul play could have been involved. She doesn't tell them this, just to the family. She sends an email to, all of his friends and relatives, which seems really unprofessional. I don't think they would actually do that. That seems like it wouldn't work out. Jeremy gets really, really mad about this because Jeremy's like, "How dare they tell us this in an email when they should have told us this in person? This is an emotional thing." And it's like, "Jeremy, you're not entitled to any of this information because you're not his family members," but sure. Chapter 7. Jeremy attempts to walk to the police department. He doesn't call them. He walks to the police department and walks in, and he asks the police officer at the front desk, "Hey, why did I get an email telling me that my friend might have been murdered?" And the officer is like, "You know what, let me go ask the chief if she can talk to you." So this guy goes and talks to the chief. The chief is like, "No, I don't like people's emotions. That's why I sent the email. Emotions are dumb, and I hate other people. So I don't want to talk to this kid." Which obviously is not something you want in a police chief, so she's just an unlikable bitch. I don't understand if this person really hates human emotions and really doesn't want to deal with emotional people, why would she go into a career in law enforcement? So Jeremy is mad and he walks away because he doesn't have a car. And nobody in this book has a car. It's just everyone's walking to places all the time. I don't understand why no one has a car, but okay. So Jeremy's dad has a dad talk with him in the garage, and his dad's like, "You're sad. Stop being sad. Get a hobby, you loser." And where they then talk about this white cream that his dad has in the garage, and it's supposed to be this highly basic cream that's poisonous when you put it on human skin, but it's supposed to help paint or something. So Nicole tries to call Jen a bunch of times and Jen never answers, so Nicole's like, "Jen clearly doesn't want to talk to me right now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk to her house, take a shot every time someone just walks to someone else's house, completely uninvited, to have a conversation that could have been a phone call." So Jen obviously answers the door and is like, "Why the fuck did you just show up at my house?" Which is a completely reasonable thing to ask. And she tells Nicole to go away, which again is reasonable when you don't want to talk to someone because your boyfriend just died. So Jeremy goes to the police station again to talk to the police chief, and the police chief refuses to talk to him again because she doesn't like human emotions because she's a terrible person, and Jeremy walks away all angry. So Jeremy walks to Roger's house, uninvited, and Jeremy's like, yeah, the cops in our town, they're just lazy dumbasses, and I'm a big smart galaxy brain, so I can solve the murder. Roger, you and I can solve what happened with the murder, because clearly the cops aren't doing it. And Roger's like, yeah, I guess I have nothing better to do. So they decide they're gonna investigate together. Chapter 9. So we're on chapter 9 at this point, and so far 2 things have happened. Rest in peace, the English language. It died in 2015 when this was published. So then we get in chapter 9, and we get an explanation that Roger asked out this girl Beth that we have never seen before in the book, and Beth decided to go out with him, and I guess they went on a date and it went well. So Beth is like, hey, Stanley, I think that you're sad. We should go do drug. And then Stanley's like, no, I don't want to do drug, even though I'm sad. And Beth is like, do it, pussy. And he's just like, okay. So they walk together to this abandoned property where this house clearly isn't being lived in, and then they walk behind it and there's a shed. And in the shed are the junky bully characters from before, which are Brett, Peter, and Victor. And here they peer pressure Stanley into smoking weed with them. Again, you can see my PSA small little Catholic boy youth group energy in this when I was 15, because Stanley's like, I don't want to get into a life of drugs. I can't do a life of drugs. I'm a good kid. I wouldn't do drug. And then they're like, why don't you just do it, pussy? And he's just like, alright, I guess I'm not that good of a kid. So he does drug, and yeah, they all smoke weed together, and I think, yep, that's the end of the chapter. So now we're on chapter 10, and Jeremy walks to Jen's house, and he asks her a few questions about Dominic's murder and where she was when Dominic was killed. And she's like, wait, are you accusing me of killing my own boyfriend? And Jeremy's like, well, not yet. And Jen obviously gets mad and kicks him out. You see the main bully guy, Brett, he walks home. On his garage is red paint that says child murderer. So someone thinks that Brett killed Dominic, but we just don't know who did it yet. I guess even Brett doesn't have a car. Fuck. So chapter 11, we get some exposition about Jeremy and how he hasn't done anything successful yet. So Jeremy just shows up at Stanley's house, and his mom answers the door, and she's like, sorry, Stanley's not home. He's out with his new friends. And Jeremy's like, new friends? Stanley can't have friends other than me and the 4 people I say he needs to be friends with. Who's he hanging out with? So now Jeremy and Roger are both overly possessive friends, which is obviously great traits that you want in a friend. And his mom was like, oh yeah, he's hanging out with Brett, Victor, and Peter. You know those people that bully you and your weird friend Dominic who's dead? Them. So Jeremy's obviously mad. So then we get a weed smoking scene, again, written by me, who was 15 and had never smoked weed before. And they're just like talking like the characters in that 70s show would when they smoked weed. You know how like they were over accentuated with smoking weed for comedic effect? Well, this isn't funny, it's not a comedy, and I took that literally and just wrote that. So Roger is walking home from Jeremy's house because of course he's not driving home. He's just walking home because nobody has a car and everyone walks everywhere. And Brett just shows up. He knows where Roger is magically for no apparent reason. Hey pussy, I know it was you who spray painted my garage. I know you did that. And Roger was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't spray paint the garage. And then Brett's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna punch you in the face. And Brett punches him in the face like a typical Disney Channel original villain would. And they have a little fight. Brett just kind of beats the shit out of Roger, you know, 300 style. And he's just like, don't mess with me, punk. I'm a Disney Channel original villain. I smoke weed and I fuck. And then we get to chapter 12, which is unironically titled Cancer. Jeremy gets to Roger's house, just shows up at his house, because why not? How you do, just show up to each other's house. He sees Roger at the door, bleeding from his face. His nose is broken. Roger's like, Jeremy, you gotta help me. I just got beat up and my nose is hurt. You gotta heal me. And Jeremy's like, yeah, let's do that. Let's go into your house. And I'm just thinking, you're literally, like, this is describing he's, like, covered in blood. And they don't call 911. They still don't call 911. So Jeremy is trying to heal Roger, and he's like looking at Roger's broken nose, and Jeremy is thinking, I can't possibly help you, we need you to go to the hospital, which is the smartest thing anyone in this entire book has said so far. Jeremy doesn't call 911, Jeremy doesn't call Roger's parents, Jeremy calls his own dad, and then Jeremy's dad drives to Roger's house and then drives them both to the hospital. So now Roger's just laying in bed and Jeremy's sitting there next to him, and I guess this doctor and Roger just still haven't even considered calling Roger's parents and telling them that something happened. The doctor tells Roger that because he was assaulted, that the doctor called the police, and that the chief of police is waiting in the hallway to interview him. And I don't think a doctor can do that. I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but that just doesn't seem, it seems a little sus. And then the chief of police is there. You know, the chief of police that so far her only character trait is that she doesn't care about human emotions. She didn't send any of her officers or patrolmen or anything to talk to Roger. She went there to do it herself. And she just interviews him with Jeremy there, and she doesn't need Roger's parents to be there. She just starts interviewing him, which is just very unprofessional. And then Roger says this: well, I was making my way to my friend Jeremy's house. In order to get there, I needed to pass by the Yellow County Lake.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
And Jeremy's just there seething with rage, like a little angry turbo virgin, where he's just like, this woman wouldn't talk to me. Hey look, it was 15-year-old me writing this. Of course I would write a weird, awkward teenager who's mad that a girl won't talk to him. But yeah, the chief of police, he's mad that she wouldn't talk to him, and he could ask her all the questions he wants right here, but he's just like seething with rage, so he can't possibly do it. And the chief of police just comments about the Yellow County Lake, just being like, oh yeah, I bring my daughter Lucy there on Wednesdays at noon. I don't know why she would just say that, but she just says that, and then the chapter ends with you seeing the chief of police tucking her daughter into bed, and then going back to her bed where there's no other person there with her, so she's all alone, and there's a photo next to her bed of her and her husband, who is suggested to have died. So I think that this is some kind of a way that I was trying to get the reader to build sympathy for the chief of police, because I know that she's a heartless, cruel bitch, but oh, she had a husband once and he died, and now she's raising a daughter. Isn't that like, that's sympathetic? And honestly, it's just not. This is a character who's completely unlikable in every way. The fact that she has a tragic backstory doesn't make me like her. It just, okay, it's there. Alright, so we open up with chapter 13, and Roger's mom runs into the chief of police at the grocery store. Important detail. So we have Nicole walking to Jen's house. Again, she's walking there. She couldn't have called her on the phone. That would be too difficult. So Nicole's just walking to Jen's house, and Brett just magically appears. If you were mad in Game of Thrones towards the end that people were teleporting, you will be furious by this book. Brett teleports everywhere. He knows where everyone is. He's just super powered galaxy brain Brett, who teleports to Nicole, and he's just like, hey, did you spray paint on my garage? And Nicole's like, no, I didn't do that. And Brett's like, yeah, well, you're gay, and then punches her in the nose and runs away. And Nicole, instead of calling the police about this, calls Jeremy. And then Nicole's like, hey, Jeremy, should we maybe call the police about this? And Jeremy's like, pfft, the police? They're dumb. I'm a big old galaxy brain. I'm so much smarter than they are. And they told us they'd have Brett in handcuffs by today. And that hasn't happened yet. And I read that and I thought, that hasn't happened. I read this whole thing. The police never said that. I don't know why Jeremy would say this as if I wrote that, but I didn't. So now Jeremy is concerned that maybe Brett is going to follow him and beat the crap out of him, and he runs home and he looks outside his door and no one had followed him, so Jeremy goes into the garage and picks up the bottle of face cream. And we see a flashback of Dominic and Jen arguing. And Ooh, this is intriguing because Dominic, everyone loves Dominic, and now he might have a character flaw. So then Jeremy takes a bottle of poison to Roger, and he's like, Roger, we gotta poison Brett. He's gonna try to kill all of us. Roger is just like, no dude, we shouldn't do that. That could kill him. And you're gonna realize this now. This is the beginning of Roger's whole character just being other people telling him what they want to do, and then Roger telling them not to do that thing. This is the first time it happens, but it's just gonna happen a lot. And Jeremy's like, yeah, I could just break into Brett's house and dump this bottle of poison into his shampoo, and then when he puts on shampoo, he might get really, really sick, but it probably won't kill him. He'll probably be fine. We have a pointless scene of Nicole waking up and looking at her cat. And then we get another pointless scene of Nicole coming out of the closet to Dominic, which I would read for you, but I think I'll cringe so hard that I'll just explode if I were to read that scene out loud. And then we get a scene of Roger telling Jeremy how much he loves his friends. And then Jeremy's like, Roger, I gotta go to Jen's house because Brett could be going to Jen's house for all we know, trying to hurt her. So they're scared that Brett is going after Jen next instead of Jeremy. So Jeremy runs away. And then his mom calls him. 90% of this book is just Roger being alone at his house and then someone showing up at his house or calling him on the phone. So Roger's mom calls him on the phone and is like, hey, your friend Jen called me on the phone and told me that she's gonna walk over to our house to hang out with you. So Jen didn't call Roger to ask if he wanted to hang out. She called his mom. She's just gonna walk there and not have her dad drive her or something. And still, they don't call the police, even though Brett could be going after either Jen or Jeremy. And we don't know. So Jeremy is sprinting to Jen's house. He's passing the lake. He's just sprinting in the woods. And somehow Brett knows where Jeremy is and just appears out of the bushes and like clocks Jeremy in the jaw, knocking him over. He starts clapping and speaking like an anime villain. He's like, fancy meeting you here. Brett is just a smart Chad anime villain, and it's so funny to me. So he grabs Jeremy by the collar and pushes him up against the tree, and he's like, you know what, nerd? I know that you're the one that painted my garage. And Jeremy's like, no, I swear to God it wasn't me. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't paint your garage. I think you're cool. Brett's like, no, you either painted my garage or you know who painted my garage. Jeremy clocks Brett in the face and pushes Jeremy over a cliff, and Jeremy breaks his leg and falls into the lake. And Jeremy walks over to Brett, who's like in shallow water with a broken leg. And Jeremy's like, you know what? I know you didn't kill Dominic because you were stalking Stanley at the time that Dominic was killed. And Brett was like, okay, so then why don't you just let me go? And then Jeremy's like, because you're in the way. And then Jeremy drowns Brett. I forgot his name for a second. All these people just have generic suburban white people names, so they're just all the same in my head. So Jeremy drowns Brett, and Brett is dead. And that's the end of part 1. What happens in chapter 2 is so boring because, like, I swear to God, 90% of it is just everyone telling each other how they feel about the events of part 1, and it is so boring to read. People have flashbacks, flashing back to events that we already know happened. People have pages upon pages where they just think about their entire motivations and all the events that have happened in the book so far. People have phone calls about everything that has happened in the book so far, but nothing literally happens. It is so lame and boring and a terrible reading experience. So Jeremy decides to get rid of the evidence that he killed Brett by taking off all of his clothes, putting it in a plastic bag, clipping his fingernails and putting that in the plastic bag, and then cutting off all of his hair and putting that in this plastic bag. and then he takes it to a dump where he sneaks into the dump and he dumps all this shit underneath a car and then he lights it on fire. There could be cameras at this dump, or someone could find you that you're lighting a fire in this dump that you don't own. You just broke. That's breaking and entering. That's arson and murder. And Jeremy's dumb when he could have just burned this in his backyard and just told people he was grilling or something. For a character that's made out to be smart, he's kind of a dumbass. Another thing that annoys me about part 2 is in part 1, there were 2 active characters. There was Jeremy and there was Brett. So you have Jeremy who was trying to find... I can't believe I'm using part 1 as a good example. So you have Jeremy who's trying to find out who killed Dominic, and you have Brett trying to find out who spray painted his garage and accused him of killing Dominic. Despite the fact that it's written very shitty, it's an actually... Like, when I say that out loud, it sounds interesting, you know what I mean? It's like, there's these 2 opposing forces who don't like each other and are both trying to find out information from the other side. That is inherently interesting, despite the fact that it was written shitty. Compared to part 2, though, part 2, it's like Jeremy's just kind of hiding the entire time, and Brett's dead, so it's like there are no active characters for a good chunk of part 2, and it makes it so boring. So we get a flashback where Dominic is arguing with Jen, and he slaps her, and it just kind of feels cheap to set up Jen's possible reason for her maybe killing Dominic after he dies. If this was, say, introduced before he died, then it could have been interesting, because then it could have been like, you know, Jen has motivation to kill him. Like, that's what a good murder mystery does, is it sets up a lot of possible suspects who could have done it, and all could have benefited from this person dying. Like, Game of Thrones has 2 great murder mysteries. Chapter 18, the junkies react to Brett dying. Chapter 19, we see the junkies do shrooms and they convince Stanley to do shrooms with them. And chapter 20, I think is the worst chapter in the book, as if it can't possibly get worse. Chapter 20 is the worst one, because there are so many scenes that are just repeating information that the audience already knows. So we get a flashback showing us the police chief with her husband on their honeymoon. We get a flashback of Brett and one of the other junkies, Peter, who are shooting in their backyard. And then we get another pointless flashback of Jeremy's 14th birthday party. None of these flashbacks serve the story at all. I don't know why these are in this. We're on chapter 22. So Stanley has this scene where he's just staring at himself in the mirror and he's like, how could I have possibly done drugs? I was such a good boy and now I'm doing drugs. And it's like, dude, you smoked weed 3 times and then you've had a shroom. And then we get another flashback of the police chief being happy with her husband. Again, these flashbacks don't make us like the character because the character is a cruel bitch. And then we go on to chapter 22. And you may be saying, Rich, I thought we already did chapter 22. Well, we did. But this next chapter is also titled chapter 22. So, 15-year-old me can't count or format a book because it looks like this. And then Beth peer pressures Stanley into doing heroin, and everyone in this junkie group do heroin together. And then we get this flashback of the police chief, and you're never gonna believe this. It's her getting an email from a doctor telling her that her husband died. So the reason that she sent everyone this email saying that Dominic may have been killed is because some years ago she got an email from a doctor telling her that her husband was dead. Does this make us like the character? No. So Stanley goes through withdrawal and he's just scratching his arm up because he did heroin once and he just loves heroin now and he just needs to do it. So the way he shows this is by sitting at home scratching his arm. Jeremy's sitting in his room being like, oh, why haven't the cops found me yet? Because I clearly killed Brett. And then he just has this galaxy brain moment. And he's like, wait a second. They haven't found me out yet because I'm just so much smarter than them. And they're so dumb, but I'm so smart. That's why they haven't found me yet. I'm such a genius. Just throw the whole book away. So now we get into what I'm not saying this sarcastically. We get to the best chapter of the book because things are actually going to happen. So Jeremy's like, I'm such a galaxy brain, I'm so smart. So we see the police chief sitting at the park because it's Wednesday at noon, and obviously, like she said several times so far, she goes to the park with her daughter on those days, and her daughter's going on the swing set, and then her daughter falls off the swing set, so the chief gets up from the bench and walks over to her daughter, and he's trying to help her daughter because she got a cut on the knee, and then the police chief's like, God, I love you because you're so little and you're so alive, and then she's like, but I gotta put on sunscreen for you. And so she walks back to her purse, takes out a bottle of sunscreen, starts putting sunscreen on her daughter. The next scene is you see that same scene, but it's from the perspective of Jeremy, who is actually hiding in the bushes during that interaction there. And as soon as the police chief stands up from the bench to go help her daughter, who had fallen off the swing, Jeremy runs over to her purse without her noticing and takes the bottle of poison and dumps it into the police chief's bottle of sunscreen, and then he runs back into the bushes, and then, you know, he's intending to kill the police chief, but then he sees she's putting this sunscreen on her daughter. Immediately he goes to say something to stop her, but then he stops himself and just kind of lets it happen. So he thinks, like, what's a bigger distraction than your own daughter dying? Thinking that this will get the police chief off of his case. It's an interesting kind of psych out, because you're watching this innocent scene play out, and then all of a sudden you realize it's not so innocent. So then we introduce the character Samuel, who's going to be replacing the police chief because she quits after her daughter dies, and this character Samuel is like, I'm gonna whip this police department into shape. They might hate me, but I'm gonna whip them into shape. So Sam goes into the police station, and he's looking at all the evidence that the police officers have collected so far for Dominic's murder, and he realizes that they've barely done anything, and he just kind of yells at all of them for being terrible. And I kind of love this scene because you can tell that this police chief is just as fed up with how lame this book is as I am, because he's just like, why have none of you done anything? And me as a reader, I was just like, yeah, why haven't they done anything? So Jeremy just shows up at Jen's house, and he decides to start asking her more questions about Dominic's death. Jen is like, hey man, you're kind of being a dick. And Jeremy's like, well, you know what? I wouldn't be such a dick if no one was solving this whole Dominic case thing. And she's like, hey dude, stop trying to find out who killed Dominic. You're his friend, you're not a detective. And then Jeremy's like, well, you better not get in my way, because Brett was the first person to get in my way, and you know what happened to him. And she's just like, what do you mean? So you're saying you killed Brett? And then Jeremy doesn't say anything, and he just walks away like a badass. He just reminds me of, like, just this pathetic attempt to be like a smart detective, like in Death Note. Jeremy is essentially cringy Death Note. And that's the end of part 2. Chapter 28 starts off with a flashback of Stanley's girlfriend Beth dating Dominic. And this is something that was never set up before. We're led to believe these characters were friends for 5 years, and they never brought up the fact that Beth dated Dominic. That doesn't make any sense. And Dominic hits Beth, so he's a serial woman hitter. And so Beth tells her friend Brett, who was alive before at this time, and she's like, hey, Dominic hit me. And then Brett, you know, because he's such a good guy, he's like, well, obviously now I need to bully Dominic for the rest of high school because he hit you. And I love the fact that Brett was mad at Dominic for hitting a woman, and then to get back at Dominic, Brett hits Nicole, a woman. So we get to chapter 29, and we're seeing the junkies, and it's Victor's birthday, and Peter gives him cocaine as a birthday present, which is just a great thing to do for your friend. I really love how this book is teaching good, friendly values. And then they all are kind of doing drugs, and then Jeremy shows up. I don't know how Jeremy knows where they are, but he's just a super mega galaxy brain now, and he just knows now. I guess he gained Brett's ability to teleport and know where everyone else is at any given time. So Jeremy starts shaming Stanley for doing drugs, like, how dare you, Dominic would never want you to do drugs. And then Samuel, the new police chief, shows up and busts... Which character? Samuel busts Peter for having drugs, and then Peter gets arrested. So you see Victor and Stanley and Beth, and they're all sad that Peter, who was their supplier, is getting arrested because he had drugs. And then Jeremy is just like without them knowing he's behind them and starts like slow clapping. Like a villain, and basically just starts maniacally laughing. He's like, ha 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 ha. I got your friend Peter busted because I'm such a galaxy brain anime villain. Aren't I so cool? Jeremy's basically enlightened at this point. He knows where everyone is at all times. He teleports, he slow claps. He's just a giga mega ultra galaxy brain Chad. So then we're on chapter 30. Jen just appears at Roger's house and she's like, Roger, I'm nervous about Jeremy. And then Roger's like, yeah, you know what, Jen? I'm also nervous about Jeremy. And then that's it. Jen leaves. Great conversation there, guys. So then Samuel just shows up at Jen's house and he's like, hey, I want to question you about your boyfriend's death. And she's like, okay, cool. And then the scene ends. Wouldn't it have been interesting to watch that conversation? But no, we just find out that the conversation is happening, but we don't get to see it. And then we see Jeremy break into a house. We don't know what house, he just breaks into one. And then Jen gets an ominous phone call where at 2 o'clock in the morning someone calls her, she answers it, and there's just breathing on the other end, and then they hang up. I think I was trying to be like Vince Gilligan writing Breaking Bad, but there was context that made that cool in Breaking Bad and pretty lame in this book. Alright, so chapter 31. Victor walks over to Jeremy in the middle of school and he kind of punches Jeremy in the face, and Jeremy just takes it, and Victor's like, hey, you got my friend busted, I hate you. And then Jeremy just kind of, he gets into a fight with Victor, but he beats Victor with his mind. So Jeremy's like, yeah, but you're a pathetic junkie and you're gonna amount to nothing. Victor just starts crying and he falls over onto the ground crying in the middle of the hallway at school, and then everyone's watching them and Jeremy just walks away so proud of himself. Like, look at how much of a smart giga Chad I am. I am so cool. And then we got a scene where Jeremy shows up at Roger's house and he's like, Roger, I'm concerned about Jen. And Roger's like, me too. And then they're like, cool, good conversation. And then Jeremy walks away. Then Samuel shows up at Stanley's house. I guess he's gonna interview Stanley, but we don't get to see that conversation either. We just know what's gonna happen. And then another scene of Jeremy breaking into someone's house, and we don't know what house he's breaking into. I don't know why I thought that was cool and mysterious. It's just annoying. It's interesting that Jen and Jeremy are now having this, like, they don't trust each other at all, because Jen thinks that Jeremy killed Brett, and Jeremy thinks that Jen is trying to take him out or something, and they're both kind of trying to pull Roger in their own direction. That's kind of cool. I'm really struggling to find things to praise about this book. Alright, so chapter 32. Jen shows up at Roger's house, and she's like, Roger, we gotta run away. And Roger's like, no, we shouldn't do that. Which, again, it's just people showing up to Roger's house saying that they want to do something, and Roger telling them not to do that thing. And now we're on to chapter 33. So we're winding down towards the end of the book. Roger realizes that Jeremy broke into his house, and he's really mad about it, as you would be if your friend broke into your house. I wrote the damn book, and I don't even know why Jeremy broke into his house in the middle of the night. And then we see Victor. He's just sitting alone crying because he doesn't have any friends anymore because Stanley and Beth are hanging out. Brett is dead and Peter's in jail. So Victor's just holding the cocaine that he was given for his birthday, and he has his dad's hunting rifle, and he snorts the cocaine, and then he leaves his house. We don't know where he's gonna go with this rifle, but he's high as a kite, and we're gonna find out. So then, once again, for like the millionth time, the scene is Roger sitting at home alone, and then someone just shows up at his house. So Jen is now at his house, and she's telling Roger that they should both run away together because Jen thinks that Jeremy's gonna kill her and eventually kill Roger. And once again, Roger's like, no, Jeremy would never do that. Jeremy's really a good guy. We should all just be one happy family, even though that's obviously not gonna work out. Roger's a total dumbass. So Jen leaves. She's like, I'm gonna run away. And then Roger's mom calls him on the phone. And she's like, hey, just to let you know, your father and I are going on a date right now. And just let us know if you need anything. And Roger doesn't tell her that Jeremy might kill Jen. He doesn't tell her that, and he doesn't tell them that his friend Jen is gonna run away. This whole book could have just been solved in like 5 pages if one person told an adult or a police officer what is happening. But they're just never gonna do that, because otherwise there would be no drama and then there would be no book. So these characters have to be mentally retarded, otherwise this book just doesn't work at all. So Jen is now running away, and we see a flashback where Jen was the one that sprayed in red paint child murder on Brett's garage. But if she really thought that Brett was the one that killed Dominic, why would she not tell the police? And also, this is just a terrible time to be revealing this, because at this point in the book, we're thinking to ourselves, like, we don't know who killed Dominic, I guess. So we gotta figure out who it is. And by Jen spray painting this onto Brett's garage, it basically confirms that it wasn't Jen who killed Dominic, who's one of the prime suspects. And at this point, we really don't have a whole lot of suspects. Roger's too stupid to have possibly killed Dominic. We know Brett didn't do it. It really only gives us the possibilities of Jeremy and Roger. Alright, so chapter 35 is going on and Jen is running away, and all of a sudden, like I said earlier, Jeremy just has the ability that Brett had before, which is to know where everyone is at all times and to just teleport over to them. So Jeremy just appears out of nowhere in the woods with Jen, and he's like, "Hey Jen, where do you think you're going?" And she can clearly run away. Like, Jeremy's not built up to be this athletic guy, and she could clearly just run away, but instead she stops and she's like, "I'm running away cause you're crazy, and I know you killed Brett, and I hate you, and I'm gonna run away." And Jeremy's like, "No, Jen, we're such good friends. Dominic would want us to be friends." And Jen, for whatever reason, is like having this epiphany that Jeremy's right, and she's like, "Oh my god, Jeremy, you're right. You're my friend. Why would I ever not trust you? I should always trust you." And she starts crying, and then she goes and hugs Jeremy, and Jeremy's hugging her, and I guess that's nice, but then Jeremy's just like, "Yeah, but now you're in the way, so I'm gonna kill you." So Jeremy cracks her neck and throws her dead body into the lake. At this point, Jeremy is the only person we have seen to have killed people. He's killed Brett, the police chief's daughter, and Jen now. That's 3 people. No one else has been shown to kill people. So in a murder mystery, that's not really what you want to have, is only one possible suspect. Alright, so chapter 36 opens up. We've only got 3 chapters left. We're almost done with this shit. Roger's hanging out at his house, and he's just sitting there doing nothing. And then Nicole just shows up at his house. Nicole hasn't been in this book for like 100 pages, but now she's back in the book, and she just shows up at his house like, "Hey, we haven't hung out in a while. We should hang out right now." And then Roger's obviously nervous because he's scared about Jen, because she, as far as he knows, she just ran away. And then Jeremy just appears at Roger's house. Roger's looking at him and he's like, "Hey, Jeremy, do you know where Jen is?" I don't know why he thinks Jeremy would know this. He just magically has this inclination that Jeremy did something to Jen. And Jeremy's like, "Well, Roger, she was in the way. Of course I had to get rid of her, dummy. I'm a big galaxy brain Chad now because I killed people, and Jen was in our way of finding out who killed Dominic. I need to stop a killer by killing a bunch of people." So Roger and Jeremy get into a fight, and Nicole's crying, and once again, we're told that a fight is happening, and then the scene just ends. So many scenes are like, "Hey, something cool's about to happen," and then they just end before that cool thing happens. It's a really frustrating reading experience to not see the coolest parts of the book, I guess. Alright, so chapter 37 comes in, and we see there's a bunch of cops and ambulances at Roger's house. Roger clearly lost this fight with Jeremy, and Roger's leg is broken, and there's the police chief Samuel there, and Roger's like, "I need to talk to you, I need to tell you something. It was my friend Jeremy who beat the crap out of me. But I stabbed him in the leg, and he's gonna walk towards the lake. I know that he's gonna walk towards the lake because I know this. I don't know how Roger knows where Jeremy's walking to, but he is right. Jeremy's over by the lake. Why would Roger know this? I don't know. How did Roger get a knife to stab him? I don't know. These would be interesting things to see, but Roger just kind of explains it. The police chief and one other police officer run towards the lake, and they're gonna chase down Jeremy. So now we see Jeremy kind of hobbling over by the lake with a knife in his leg. Wow, I sure am stabbed right now. And he looks up and he sees Victor high on cocaine with a hunting rifle. I don't know how Victor knew where Jeremy was, but he just did. And so Victor's holding the rifle up at Jeremy, and he's like, hey, you killed Brett. I know you killed Brett. My friend Brett, who gave me drugs, you killed him, and you got Peter busted and sent him to jail. Which, honestly, Victor's right. I would probably be peeved about that, too. And at this moment, Jeremy has a magical flashback to the night Dominic died, and we see Jeremy choked Dominic to death and threw him in the lake because he was mad at Dominic for getting into a fight with Jen, and then Jeremy gets scared that he just killed one of his friends, and Jeremy runs away and accidentally slams his head into a tree, and he got amnesia, and that's why he forgot that he killed Dominic. Isn't that just the dumbest shit you've ever heard in your life? It's the worst twist ever because you could see it coming from a mile away because Jeremy's the only person who have killed anyone at this point in the book. It's just a bad twist. The amnesia twist is dumb. It's done to death so much. It's like the second worst plot twist ever after it was all a dream. In fact, I think I would have preferred this book if it just was all a dream. So Victor's just holding the gun at Jeremy, and Victor's just like, I know that you killed Brett, and Jeremy's like, no, I never killed anyone, which we know is not true, and Victor's just like, I know you did it, and at that point, Jeremy's like, yeah, you know what, I did kill your junkie friend, because Brett was a piece of shit, and I'm glad I killed him, and that's when the police officers show up, and at that moment, Victor is distracted, and Jeremy runs into the lake, and he, goes down this hill, and slides down it, and lands in the lake, and he starts running away, and Victor holds the gun up to him, and shoots 2 bullets that miss, and then the 3rd bullet hits Jeremy right in the chest, and Jeremy dies in the lake, and then the 2 police officers run over to Victor, and they're like, hey, drop the gun, and Victor's like, no, I don't think I will, and then Victor shoots himself in the head. Final chapter, chapter 38. So we flash forward a year forward, and we see Roger, Nicole, and Stanley's girlfriend Beth is still there, and they're all driving in Roger's car. They're all just, they've moved on with their lives. They're all just having such a great time. So to answer the question from 4, no, Jeremy was not some kind of gay stereotype. I really had that little faith in my 15-year-old self that I thought Stanley was going to end up being some kind of gay stereotype, but he wasn't. And so they're having fun friend banter, and Roger's making fun of Nicole a little bit, and Nicole's like, hey, focus on driving. And Roger goes, focus on milking almonds. And then the book is over. Am I glad I read it? It was fun to go back to this thing that I took a year out of my life to make, and it was very, very nostalgic to me to read this, despite the fact that it's probably the cringiest shit I've ever done in my life. Scratch that. The cringiest thing I ever did in high school. I probably did worse shit in middle school, but, it was really fun to write this. I remember this was like my passion project. It was my baby. I would skip doing homework to just write this. I actually wrote 3 books. This was the first one I wrote. I ended up writing another one freshman year of college and another one junior year of college, and it was just a lot of fun to write those, and this one is obviously the worst, and I think I improved a lot over the years since then in the other 2 books I wrote. Despite the fact that this book is really, really bad, and it feels like I just kind of made it up as I went along, there's a lot of heart to it. I know that I was very inexperienced, but I had a passion for this that made me do this. It wasn't like a lot of people just say that they want to write a book. I actually went out and did it because it was my passion. I had teachers who read it. I had friends who read it, and they all were very, very supportive of me, which made me feel so good as a young teenager who had never really accomplished anything. This was like my first big life accomplishment, and it's just really nice to go back and reread it, even though it was bad. I want to thank everyone for getting me to 1,000 subscribers. It doesn't seem like a lot, but to me, it without a doubt is. And, you know, they send you the gold play button for hitting 1 million, the silver play button for hitting 100,000, but they don't send you anything physically for hitting 1,000. They send you a congratulatory email, and then they delete your channel. So I decided it would be fun to make something myself. It is the Ruby play button, and then on the back it has the date. I don't know if you guys can see it. It has the date that I reached 1,000 subscribers, and it says November 10th, 2020, 1,000 subscribers on the back. So this is my 1,000 subscriber play button that I built myself. This right here, this 1,000, I could not have done it by myself. I've been watching YouTube since 2007, and once I started, I don't think I've missed a single day. I've been watching YouTube basically my entire life, every single day, and it has always been a dream of mine to make a YouTube channel, to make videos where I connect with like-minded people. I didn't know if anything would come out of this. I didn't know if I would get, I didn't think I could even get 10 subscribers. And you know, when you look at a channel with 1 million subscribers or something, it's easy to just write it off in your head. It's like, oh, that's easy. And then when you start your own channel and you see that subscriber number is at 0 and you have no views, all of a sudden 5, 10 subscribers seems like a lot. And the fact that I hit 1,000, it blows me away. And it might not seem like a lot to you, but to me, it means the world. My YouTube channel is just my favorite hobby, and I love seeing you guys comment funny things about the videos I make. The most rewarding part about this whole thing is when I see the same person comment on multiple of my videos and then eventually just start commenting on all of my videos that I upload. That is just like the coolest thing to me. If you've ever commented on more than one of my videos, just know that I know who you are, and I appreciate you guys so, so much. And some of you guys are even just funnier than I am. Like, I'll come up with a joke and I'll think that a video is funny and I'll upload it, and then someone will seemingly effortlessly make a comment that's funnier than anything I said in the video, and it just totally blows me away. Oh, 1,000, it's just so cool. I finally got 4 digits. It feels like confirmation that what I'm doing is reaching people, and the fact that that's happening is all that I could ever want. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for watching, thank you for commenting, thank you for subscribing, thank you for everything, thank you. You've made my dream come true.